Hello, everybody. Hello. It's already getting late, so I'll introduce myself quickly. My name is David Young. I'm an artist, and I've been running a series of workshops over the last few months called the Reposition Matrix. So the idea behind the workshops is to investigate the use of drones as part of the war on terror, but through this kind of through this system of collaborative mapping. So I invite groups of people to come and contribute to the workshops. We normally begin by discussing some of our kind of the issues that we're already, I think, familiar about, and then through these discussions we begin to to work on this on a world map and try to describe how the territories and the ideas of sovereignty and even like the networks that allow these drones to operate, how they function in a kind of a geopolitical sense. So I'll just quickly describe. I think most of us know what these what drones or unmanned aerial vehicles are, but most often they're controlled from in as part of the war on terror. They can be controlled from places like Afghanistan, from certain air bases there, but also a lot of the time from U.S. territory itself. So places like Creech Air Force Base, which is quite close to Las Vegas, for example. So so from these bases, certain drone pilots can sit in kind of in these shipping containers with lots of computer screens around them. They can remotely pilot these vehicles that can fly over hostile territories in the Middle East and target specific insurgents who pose, as they say, an imminent threat to U.S. interests and U.S. security. So there's an interesting kind of a switch here we can say is that the kind of the system of control is always facing about what is going to happen in the near future. So it's always focused on this idea of the imminent threat. It's not necessarily about somebody has committed a crime as such, but it's about the threat to commit a crime. So within these workshops, we're kind of trying to maybe escape some of the sensationalist views that really regularly appear in the media, and try to find some sort of balance maybe. And I find that using these mapping techniques becomes an interesting way to root it in specific locations, but also in specific kind of sources. So we're always trying to relate anything that we describe back to a source. So the sources that we kind of use while we're producing these maps might be a government document that's released under an open government initiative, an open data initiative, and it will the document might refer to, for example, a drone crash. So a drone has crashed. It has crashed because of a certain it could be something like weather, it could have been something that the pilots had done wrong. But in this document, which might seem fairly innocuous on first glance, we can begin to find interesting small side notes, like for example that private defense contractors will actually partially pilot the drones as well as military personnel. So we gather multiple documents from various sources, even like from looking at the Facebook pages of U.S. military air bases, and we can see the pilots themselves. They tag themselves in their photos, and we can begin to investigate how the war functions through these kind of, I guess, these social media channels, as well as through all these other open data initiatives, for example, or something like WikiLeaks is also a very important resource that we've been using. So we work literally with these kind of paper maps, and we just try to describe a certain kind of a geopolitical story, I guess, of how this war is functioning, because I guess the assumption or the common stated kind of belief is that these drones contribute to a dematerialization of warfare, so that it's far up in the sky. It's there's a kind of a lack of accountability and public oversight, So by using these maps, then we can begin to literally see how this plays out on this kind of global scale. But anyway, the reason why I became interested in this was when I was researching this idea of automatic warfare. So I was kind of talking about drones as being a technology that somehow speeds up certain types a certain type of war, which is like the war on terror, where the enemy is a kind of a stateless, uniformless entity that seems to exist within this kind of a network. Um, so if we go back further in time, we can look at these other types of automation. They don't use technology as such, or these kind of digital or networked systems, but they will use something like that we can refer to as like biopower. So a type of power that is in and of itself a violent power because it interferes with the bodies of the subjects who are being controlled. So the military systems, since throughout history, have been kind of founded on this notion of biopower. So biopower is regulated through the kind of the aesthetics of uniform, of ceremonial tradition, and and things like these kind of specific parades or music, things that are associated with this. So when I became interested in this, I began to go back and to look at some documents that were released during World War II, specifically U.S. military guides for military capital punishment or execution. And I was interested in this because it immediately because they have to create a type of a system that regulates our kind of objectionable our kind of reaction to object to this type of this type of event. So by doing this, they rely on things like uniform, yes, and on these kind of on these parades and escorts that lead up to the execution itself, to kind of to automate the situation so that people don't need to make as much specific decisions, or things like this. So in these types of systems, they have they define spatially how the execution should take place. So they define how many people, how many spaces apart they should stand, and how they should target the person target the prisoner. And it goes down to, for example, that they remove all kind of insignia, military insignia from the prisoner if the person is a soldier. And when it comes down to this level, there's very specific kind of metaphorical, of course, reasonings for this. Is that they're removing the person from this military context and putting them into a different space, where they're wearing a kind of an anonymized uniform. They don't belong to any wider entity. These types of military executions as well, they always came. It was like a manifestation, we can say, of sovereign power. So the power of the head of state, as the head of state is the one who can call an exception. So in the case of a plea for to be freed from this system, they would have to go straight to the president, and the president must sign off on this. So if the president holds a state of exception, it's a sovereign power. And this actually, a lot of these systems that we can find in World War II from like the firing squad and things like this, they actually carry over into drone warfare in quite a direct way. Is that there's still the sovereign defines the state of exception today. So the idea is that they have these like Barack Obama, Eric Holder, maybe John Brennan, who are Barack Obama, of course, we all know, but Eric Holder and John Brennan are really key figures in this kind of regulation of the war on terror through these kind of protocol based systems. So one of these protocols is that they meet up every Tuesday and they go through these kind of these lists of people that should be targeted, and they decide how this should play out. And Barack Obama in the end must sign off on this on each name that's going to be targeted by the drones. So um, so we can see already like a parallel between this is that this idea of the sovereign defining um, the system of execution and who should be executed and so on is still carried over. But there's a number of kind of important differences as well. Is that whereas in the past the automation existed through the ceremony, so the very specific step-by-step guide essentially to what music should be played, where people should stand in the space and so on, as I mentioned earlier. Now these systems of regulation or regulatory automation exist in within these kind of technologies that are being used. So with the use of drones, for again we have groups of people, maybe it could be 3 or 4 flying one drone. One of them will handle the takeoff and landing. They can often be a private defense contractor, so not necessarily a military person, but somebody who's employed by an external company. You have somebody who will control the sensors on the drone while it is flying, and you might have another person who is controlling the weapons releases, so when they fire or not. And then on top of this, they will have a kind of someone further up the hierarchy who will describe or who will decide what steps need to be taken and call for a specific weapons release. So in this way, we can say that maybe there's a slight similarity with something like the firing squad, where responsibility is divided amongst multiple people. In the firing squad, according to this U.S. military manual for executions, there should be 8 people, 8 riflemen, and between 3 and or between 2 and 4, I think, of these men can have blank rounds in the gun. So nobody is fully certain within this firing squad who's fired the lethal round, and this was a very specific system designed to kind of to ease the conscience, I guess, of the rifleman. But in the drone, it's not so much. This system doesn't play out as kind of transparently as this. The system is instead kind of played out amongst dividing up basically like a division of labor between the operations of the drone. So there was a series of kind of events that led between these kind of firing squad scenarios, where the automation of warfare is existing through ceremony, to these kind of drone technologies where it's done through technology. And we can kind of find maybe an important counterpoint is in during the Vietnam War, whereas in the North Vietnamese were basically kind of under the Soviet sphere of influence, so they were a kind of a communist state, and they were trying to bring their weapons into the south of Vietnam through the jungles of Cambodia and Laos. And this is where the US military were trying to protect South Vietnam to stop the spread of Soviet influence further south. So the US military found out that weapons were being brought in convoys through these jungles, and they couldn't send in their men anymore because they knew that it was essentially a disaster. So this in other campaigns they had already been trying to do in the jungles, because they were a kind of a monolithic military structure. So this big kind of backed by massive investment and using all these different types of kind of technologies, but in the end they had to literally fight on the ground, or of course they used various types of air warfare as well. But when they had to go into the jungles, it was generally it was quite a failure for them, because there was a basic asymmetry in the war that was being fought. So we have this monolithic structure that would move into the jungles, and then we have on the other hand a kind of a type of guerrilla warfare where the North Vietnamese knew the terrain so well that they could manipulate that and use that against the US military. So to counteract this, they started to investigate a new a new type of system that was then became under this operation called Igloo White. So the military operation involved flying over the jungles of Cambodia and Laos and dropping sensors that would transmit data such as like vibration into the ground. So some sensors, they would embed themselves in the ground. They could pick up the vibration caused by a truck, for example. There were other sensors that some of them were microphones, even sensors that would pick up urine for some reason. So through all these different sensors, they could transmit back to a space called the Information and Communication Center in or the Information Surveillance Center in Thailand. So there was a group of soldiers who were in this bunker very far away, well, like thousands of kilometers away from the actual battlefield, and they could see on their computer screens maps of the region, and they could see where the activity was being triggered by these sensors. From this, they could order an airstrike of the region. So a plane would be ordered to fly over the area where this activity was being triggered, and they would bomb the area, and the bombs were released automatically from this information surveillance center. So in the end, the actual pilot of the plane had less control over what was going on. He just flew this trajectory, and then at some point, bombs would be dropped. So I think in a way we can see here that there's a kind of a beginning of this kind of investigation of a kind of a technologically automated warfare. And I think that that drones, while you've had these kind of other gaps like the cruise missiles used in the first Gulf War and other things like this, we have then with the drone a kind of an increasing or a crystallization of these ideas. So that's something that I've come to kind of believe, that the drone is in and of itself not necessarily a new thing. It's like, of course, it fits in with this history that I think has a lot of its roots in the Cold War, but goes back even further, even into the very basic theories of warfare. But there are a number of important differences, and one of these is that to go again back to this idea of a kind of an asymmetry of power within the two warring parties. In the war on terror, in the past we had this again the U.S. military monolithic structure, this massive force that would invade the country, and then on the other hand you have the insurgents who can disrupt this massive military investment and power by essentially like a well-placed landmine, and that will of course make it back into the news. And then the fact that the war is ongoing is like that's kind of reinstated in the media and everything. So you get this kind of the fact that the war is happening is kind of in the public conscience through these kind of media streams. So then the drone enables this to kind of be somewhat sidestepped, because they're able to fight a war that's clean. It's like clinical. It can be quite fast, but this is the idea at least. But in practice, it doesn't really seem to be like this. If we look at some data released by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, who are really doing a lot of important research into this topic, and they have reporters on the ground after such a drone strike, they can investigate how many people were killed, how many of them were militants, and how many can they speculate were actually also civilians. So this is one of the most important kind of sets of data that people have publicly accessible to counteract the kind of press releases that come after a drone strike from the U.S. government, for example. I think that essentially while these kind of, we can understand that the drones are they are kind of disrupting these older kind of the ceremonial traditions in some ways, but we still see, if you look at pictures of the drone pilots, they still wear a uniform, they still wear military patches on their shoulders, they still have some sort of feeling that they are kind of participating in a war, even though they work a kind of a shift where at the end of the day they go home to their families essentially. So there's an interesting shift here maybe, and the idea as well is that which we might see often in as a kind of maybe it's something that's often said, is that it enables the drone pilots and this whole kind of apparatus that exists around them of this hierarchical apparatus, that they can decide who should be killed a little bit too quickly, and that this maybe doesn't have so much impact on the actual pilots themselves. The pilots are removed from the physical space of the war, so therefore they can distance themselves psychologically from their behavior, which is again like this is like the core, I guess, idea behind this automation, right? Is to stop these kind of processes that make us maybe question our actions, and to create them so that they become that they become automated. But actually, it seems like that more and more like psychological studies of people who fly drones are kind of starting to contradict this. So perhaps in the coming years we will begin to see even more publicly released information stating how essentially the pilots of these drones are going to suffer incredible psychological stress. There's one drone pilot in particular has given a number of interviews to the media over the last year, and again quite recently, and he was describing how the problem with using drones against specific targets is that in the end you end up kind of stalking these targets for an extended period of time, and you get to sort of know their daily routines. In a way, they actually become humanized, which is slightly contradictory from these other arguments about these dematerialization of warfare and the kind of dehumanization of the target, the reduction of a target to some data, some location data or something like this. So yeah, just to end, and I'll take some questions after. But if we can go back again once more to Operation Igloo White, that cost $4 billion to set up, and this was the early 1970s. So that of course it's a lot of money now still, but it was it was even more money then. So it was $4 billion in investment. It was funded by the U.S. government, and the technologies were developed at MIT. And then for every year it ran, I think it ran for 4 years after. So from about 1970 to 1974, and they invested $1 billion each year to keep the program running. The program itself was in the end a massive failure. Actually, they claimed that they had targeted 30,000 Viet Cong trucks, but actually there wasn't even that many trucks in the whole region. So this was a total exaggeration in order to justify the massive costs that have gone into this high technology program. So I mean, it's very hard to speculate about what exactly is happening in the drone war, the covert drone war that is ongoing at the moment. But actually, I guess in a way we need to either support organizations like the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in whatever way we can, but also we need to actually kind of think and go beyond the kind of the normalized kind of arguments that are floating around about drone war in the tabloid media, for example. And we need to actually critically engage with the core issues, that it's not an issue of technology, but it's an issue of its use and its regulation, and the idea of this this idea of automation, I think. So yeah, thank you, and I can take a few questions if you like. Yeah. Any questions or yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, I was wondering about the information about the drone attacks that were carried out by U.S. And you mentioned something about its availability.
Mm-hmm.
and I think I remember seeing a diagram that was showing the statistic of the success of these attacks. I think on Guardian's website at some
Mm-hmm.
point. So is it transparent on the information about
Mm.
the drone attacks that were carried out so far?
No, it's actually not transparent. I think part of the core issue actually is a kind of a semantic issue. It's the definition of a successful strike. So you have this idea of the militant, and the militant is any military aged male in a strike zone. So it's almost like a post hoc definition. So if somebody is of military age and they're male and they get killed in a drone strike, they are conceivably a militant. So actually, that's the core issue right there, is that when it's defined in this way, it's very hard to actually verify the success, in inverted commas, of the drone strike. So to know how clinical it is indeed, if it has killed civilians or not. The data isn't released directly. That's why there's the Bureau of Investigative Journalism is one of the only real independent organizations that are going in and trying to verify this with people in the region by going there and speaking with the people in the area where the drone strike might have happened. So I wouldn't say it's transparent, and that's why I kind of speculate maybe with a caveat. I don't know for sure, but it's interesting maybe to link it back to this idea in Igloo White, where it was, yeah, we have the same kind of pattern of a highly exaggerated idea that of the success of this technology and of the automation, but maybe in a few years, maybe in 10, 20 years time, when things are fully made transparent, we can see that it was indeed like a long series of crises. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I think that one of the main sources, indeed, is like the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. So they actually publish their data on their website, so you can really see quite in depth. Um, yeah, 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 yeah. Well, this is he's asking about isn't assassination easier, like a kind of a traditional assassination than to create this massive, highly expensive mess of technology and everything. Um, well, I think there's a number of things. Is that they don't actually entirely know exactly who they're targeting as such. In a way, is that they're kind of they have two types of strike, kinetic strike, that they refer to as. There's the targeted strike, which I think that we can almost say it is an assassination, that they have a very specific person they want to wipe out, and they pose an imminent threat to the United States, so they want to remove them from as a threat. So that in a way is like an assassination, because the person poses a kind of a political or a power threat, and yeah, and they want to stop this, of course. The other type is called a signature strike. So it is if somebody is displaying kind of the signature behavioral traits of a militant terrorist, they can be wiped out. So this is on a more kind of a dynamic level. Essentially, they could be flying on a surveillance mission, and they will see somebody who might be planting an improvised explosive device or behaving suspiciously, and and yeah, and then they will be targeted then. So you have these two different types, but actually, in the end, the drone is actually fitted into this war on terror, the whole idea of the war on terror. So it's not exactly like a kind of an instrument of assassination as such, but it is a technology of war, like the way a tank is or an airplane is, and it's fitted into this whole idea. Also, I think that there's a massive amount of pressure from the industry, which is actually in the workshops. This is something we really investigate: is the relationship between the industry and the government, and then the military. So you have this strange kind of a triangle, and it seems like that the industry and the lobby groups related to the industry have massive influence over the other two sections of this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the other thing is that there's a kind of a strange kind of a disruption of traditional notions of sovereignty, because if they can fly over with no actual physical person in the territory, they can start to kind of manipulate these ideas maybe. And I know that like in Pakistan there is now some resistance to this actually, that there's resistance to the idea that drones do not disrupt Pakistan's sovereignty, when you know the Americans will argue the opposite. Yeah. Thank you. That's it. Yeah, great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.